Today I want to take a look at invasions in Soulmask. Now, invasions are like purges. It's where enemies from a local tribe are going to come and try to invade your base. Now, I don't fully understand the invasion system. There are some things that I still haven't been able to figure out, or that I just don't fully understand, but I'm going to give you my understanding of the invasion system and give you an idea of what you can expect when you're getting invaded. So first of all, your fever grows based on the amount of experience that you're gaining at any particular location. And the fever is based on location. So if you have a bunch of tribesmen that are crafting things and harvesting and you have your automation set up, you're going to be feeding more into that fever meter. Now, from what I can tell, when you boost your XP levels, I'm on a boosted server, so the experience gain is much higher on the server that I'm playing on than it would be on, say, an official server. So I know the fever meter grows faster when you boost the experience gain. However, what I don't know is if there's an offset in the fever meter based on your experience gain. So you have to get a higher number of fever in order for that invasion to happen. And I don't know exactly what that number is to make that trigger either. So I really can't tell you to watch your fever meter and at X number you're going to get invaded. Now, in my experience, I've never had an offline invasion. I've always been online, or somebody's been online when the invasion happens, so I don't think that you can be invaded when you're offline. However, if you logged in and the invasion started and then you logged out, the invasion is going to continue. You cannot log out to get the invasion to stop, at least on a server. What I can do is tell you how you should prepare for an invasion. So when an invasion happens, you're going to see an icon above your bonfire where the invasion is going to happen. It's going to give you an initial countdown timer, and there's going to be a scout that comes to your base. You want to make sure that you deter and interrogate that scout. The information that you gain when you deter and interrogate that scout is going to give you information about how many enemies are coming and about where they're coming from. Now, you could certainly be successful against the invasion without that information, but it definitely makes it a lot easier to know where they're coming from so that you can set up your defenses properly. And it's important to be very gentle with those scouting invaders so that you can get this information. Now, you can go face to face, toe to toe, and just try to brute force your way through the invasion. However, my suggestion is that you make traps at what level you're at. So the spike traps are really handy because you can just create a road from wherever they're spawning all the way up to your front gate and let them run over those spike traps and take damage. Additionally, roadblocks can be placed so that you can corral them a specific direction. They won't try to go over or through those roadblocks. Sometimes they'll stop and attack them, but for the most part, you can narrow down where they're headed by placing roadblocks. Once you get later on in the game, you'll also have higher level ground spikes. I have steel ground spikes put down, and I was able to obliterate an entire evasion just with those steel spikes. So whatever level you're at, definitely set down that level of defense so that these get much easier. Now, as far as I can tell, there's nothing particularly special about the loot that you're going to get from these invaders. They're going to have the standard items of the armor that they're wearing, some healing supplies, some foods, some weapons. The one thing that's different is they will bring battering rams, and those battering rams can either be used in PvP or you can break those down for the resources in the uncraft bench. At times, you will have bosses come, usually one per wave that you're getting, and those bosses are going to drop some really high level items for the tribe that you are fighting, as well as some silver trinkets, some gold trinkets, and different things like that. Now, the drops may get better as you move across the map. If you're in a higher level area, you may get better drops, like if plunderers come to attack you or something like that. But for the most part, the drops are just a bonus to being able to defeat them. Now, as far as I can tell, your fever meter only reduces part of the way when you defeat the invasion. It doesn't empty it out all the way and in its entirety, and as soon as the invasion is over, the experience starts going back in your fever meter and the process starts all over. Now, the traps that you place around do state that they will not do damage to yourself or your tribesmen as long as they're inside the range of a bonfire. However, I've noticed that even if you place them outside of the range of the bonfire, at least in my experience, they haven't done any damage to myself or my tribesmen. But be careful of this because at any point in time they could fix this to where it actually does damage if you're outside of your bonfire range, so keep that in mind. But in my opinion, the traps are hugely important to even the odds with the invasion. Especially if you're playing solo, those traps are going to make a big difference. And even if you're playing with other tribes members, those traps can really save your butt. And personally, I prefer traps over patrols, so I don't really want my tribesmen out there fighting these guys. I'd rather have the passive traps like the ground spike trap or the pegboard trap, so that when the enemies run over them, they're just constantly taking damage and you don't have to worry about rescuing or saving or losing tribesmen because of that. Additionally, your traps are going to do more damage across the board as they're running across those traps than your tribesmen are able to do. So the DPS is much higher on the spike traps than any other method, especially as you get later on in game. Early on, the regular ground spikes aren't going to do a ton of damage, but they're still going to make a difference, so I highly recommend putting these down. As you get into the later game and you start making the bronze or iron or even the steel spike traps, they're going to be a big difference to your invasion success. Building walls around your base is also very important. You do not want to let these guys inside your base and to your tribesmen. Most of your tribesmen are going to cower in the corner when the invasion happens, and they're not going to be much help when these guys invade. So, very important that you make sure your defenses are set up so that not only are you continuing to do damage to these enemies when they come up, but you have everything in place to keep them from becoming a major problem. So placing walls and then creating choke points is very important in order to defeat the enemies that are going to come in the invasion. Thankfully, they've already taken out some of the poor mechanics that were in the invasion early on, like the fact that they would come with grease tanks and just constantly throw those grease tanks on you. That's no longer in the invasion, and that's a really nice thing to have seen gone. They are still able to throw slime, and they are going to throw feces tanks, so keep that in mind, but otherwise at least the grease tanks are gone. Now, you can deter the enemies that come in the invasion. It's totally up to you. If you need some more tribesmen and you want them delivered to your front door, you can tame them when they come. Additionally, at times, some of the invaders will get stuck, so look around the area where you see the enemies spawning or where they're invading from if it feels like the invasion has halted. You may find an enemy stuck up on a place that it doesn't know how to get down from, or stuck behind something that it doesn't know how to get around, and the next wave will not spawn until you defeat the previous wave. In my experience prior to early access, when I was still testing the beta versions of the game, if you built on a cliff, a way that the enemies couldn't make it to your front gate, they would spawn on your roof. But if you're using a flat roof when you're building, you can place these spike traps on the top of your base. So if you're already built up there, I recommend placing down the pegboards on the top of your base before you get invaded. That way, if they do end up spawning on the top of your base, you'll have that extra level of defense. I have heard that they've changed this and they've made it so that they don't actually spawn on the top of your base, but I haven't confirmed that yet. If you built a bunch of traps outside of the area of your bonfire, or you placed down a bonfire so that you could place these, you can go back and retrieve a lot of these, and then whatever you can't retrieve, you can just dismantle. I recommend making a construction hammer so that you can do this rather quickly. But this will allow you to retrieve that stuff so that it doesn't decay if it's outside of your bonfire range, and you can also just clean it up in between the invasions, since the invasions invasions give you plenty of time to go around and actually place these spike traps. The rules for these may also be different in PvP than they are in PvE. I told you I wasn't taking any damage from them while I was outside of the range of my bonfire. However, on PvP, it could be that you take damage from them if you're outside of your bonfire range. I'd like to thank all my YouTube members for your continued support. Y'all are absolute legends. Don't forget to whack the like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content. And if you don't want to be out of whack, there's another video on the screen right now that you can click to support more of my content.